Okay, good afternoon. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you very much, Sasaki and Kawashima-san. It's very nice to be in Tokyo again. Every time I'm here, I feel quite impressed with the orderly traffic and flow of people, and also the good environment, and this harmony between people and the environment. China has a lot to learn in this regard. Today, the topic I'm going to talk about is identity conflicts and analysis of China's foreign policy behavior and China-Japan relations. The central question I want to explore is a puzzle in Chinese foreign policy behavior in recent years. It appears to be rather contradictory and inconsistent. For example, on the one hand, China continues to vow to adhere to peaceful development, to support international cooperation in addressing various kinds of global challenges, and to insist on dialogue and negotiation as an appropriate means to deal with international conflicts. These are very nice. On the other hand, China has taken a more proactive approach on territorial and maritime disputes in the South China Sea and in the East China Sea. And China blocked international intervention in Syria at the UN. Of course, China's position is very complicated. And also, China insisted on international pressures to make resisted international pressures to make bound commitments to CO2 emission at the Copenhagen Summit on climate change. More recently, China's position on this changed again. In the last summit between Xi Jinping and Obama, they agreed to work to cut emissions. So again, it changes position. But anyway, if you look at Chinese foreign policy behavior, it appears to be quite confusing, self-contradictory, and inconsistent. Why? Actually, contradiction and inconsistency is found in every country's foreign policy. I think Japan's foreign policy behavior can also be inconsistent and self-contradictory. However, in the Chinese case, it's much more pronounced in recent years. The question is, why does one find more inconsistency and self-contradiction in Chinese foreign policy behavior than before, than in other countries? What does this mean for China-Japan relations? These are the questions I want to explore. Basically, I want to talk about the following things. One is I'll try to review and analyze the existing explanations about China's foreign policy behavior. Secondly, I'll try to develop a new explanation to help with the help of insights from psychology and sociology. And finally, I'll try to discuss the implications for China's foreign policy behavior and China's Japan relations. First, let's talk about the existing explanations. Okay, how do people explain China's foreign policy behavior? Why it has become more inconsistent and self-contradictory than before? Broadly speaking, there are four kinds of explanations. They are respectively, the first is power and capabilities. China has grown bigger with more capabilities. Second is the rise of nationalism. The third one is bureaucratic politics. Fourth is identity. China has new identity. I'll explain them in the following slides. In terms of power capabilities, I think there are people who believe that as large country rises, its power and capabilities grow, and interests and ambitions expand. So as they become more powerful, they want to expand their interests and ambitions. To ensure security and advances other interests, a country naturally takes a more assertive and more demanding approach on international issues, especially on territorial and security issues. So why has China become more proactive in the South China Sea and East China Sea? According to these people, it's because China rises. China has more capabilities, more power. So it has become more assertive. Some people even say that China will challenge the supremacy of the US as its capabilities and power grow. For example, John Mearsheimer, professor of Chicago University, he has been arguing this view. The second approach to explain China's foreign policy behavior is nationalism. Some people say that the rise of nationalism can be seen in strong Chinese reactions to foreign offensive actions, or allegedly foreign offensive actions against China, such as US arms sales to Taiwan and Japanese government's alleged refusal to give a satisfactory apology on its war crime against China during the Second World War. China sees these actions as sort of disrespectful of China, or at least some Chinese, and also an attempt to humiliate China. So they react quite strongly against such kind of practices. In part because of this, public criticism of the Chinese government for being too soft in conducting foreign relations has become quite popular in China. So some Chinese even sent calcium pills to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Lack of courage to stand up against foreign countries which humiliate China. So nationalism, to some people, explains why Chinese foreign policy has become more proactive than before. Still others believe that it's not power and growth in power and capabilities, not a rise of nationalism. It's bureaucratic politics. Bureaucratic politics happens in all countries. Different bureaucracies, they have their own interests. They jostle to get more resources, more press, more responsibilities, more things done. So they push for different policies as different bureaucracies prevail. For example, some argue that successful maneuvers by those institutional actors with vested interests on this issue, such as the State Oceanic Affairs Administration, the Navy, and the Hainan Province, may help explain why China has taken a tough position on territorial and maritime issues in the South China Sea. The State Oceanic Affairs Administration, if South China Sea is the national priority, then it will get more resources from the more ships, more people. Okay. So it has a vested interest in this. We need to have a problem to get all these resources into this institution. The Navy, of course, they want to have more money, so they want to have more toys. So how can you persuade the government to allocate more funds to the Navy? I mean, they need a case, okay? So they want to make some trouble for themselves, to justify their demands. And for Hainan province is one of the smallest provinces, probably the smallest province in China. But if South China Sea, if the waters within the 9-dash line belongs to China, then it becomes the largest province in China. So it also has a vested interest in this. So some people say that these institutions, they have their own interests to create issues in the South China Sea. So that explains why China has become more proactive on these issues. But of course, there are other institutions, such as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Commerce, the Shanghai, other interests. They have other interests on this. Okay? They don't want this problem to be too serious because it hurts their interests. Okay? They have their own institutional interests to stabilize the South China Sea. Okay? The fourth explanation is about identities. Some people see China's newly acquired identities as the key to explain China's behavior. For example, some people say that China is a stakeholder now in the existing international order. Okay? So that explains why China is more willing to assume greater international responsibilities, such as sending a lot of peacekeeping missions and endorsing the UN Security Council's resolution on establishing a no-fly zone in Libya. And also as a developed country, sometimes China is regarded as a developed country, of course, depending on where you go. If you go to Shanghai, it's a developed country. China sees its own right in its own interest to endorse efforts to cut CO2 emission to reverse the process of global warming. Okay, there are all kinds of explanations to explain why China has been doing this and doing that. At least in general, you can see four kinds of explanations. There are problems with these explanations as far as addressing the question we proposed at the beginning. That is why Chinese foreign policy has become more self-contradictory and inconsistent. First, the growth in capabilities and rise of nationalism may help explain why China has behaved more assertively on some issues. However, they cannot persuasively explain the contradiction and inconsistencies in Chinese foreign policy behavior. For example, they cannot explain the cases where China behaves quite moderately, behaves quite constructively. So they can only explain certain behavior, but not other behavior of China. Second, the rise of nationalism explanation may help explain why China has behaved more assertively on territorial and history issues, but they cannot persuasively explain the soft and moderate aspect of Chinese foreign policy behavior, such as China's initiatives on One Belt, One Road, and building a new type of major state relations with the US. If you proceed with the nationalist approach, then you can't explain why China wants to do other things, like One Belt, One Road, and also building a new type of great power relations with the US. Thirdly, the bureaucratic politics model may help explain why China has become more assertive and contradictory in its foreign policy behavior on various kinds of issues. However, it cannot adequately explain why China's behavior is contradictory on the same issue at the same time. Very interesting, if you look at the climate change issue, Chinese government is advocating the right to defend the right to development on the part of the third world countries or developing countries, and also try to cut emissions, take drastic draconian measures to cut emissions in China. So it's on the same issue, it acts in a very contradictory way. So the bureaucratic politics approach cannot adequately explain this. Finally, China's newly acquired identities may help explain why China behaves differently from the past. However, it is not helpful in explaining why China also sometimes behaves the same way as in the past. So new identities may lead to new behavior, but then the problem is the new identities have not prevented China from behaving in the old way. So maybe we need a new explanation of China's foreign policy behavior. If we analyze these previous four explanations, we find that despite their differences, they all share two things in common. One is that they all assume that China's identities are each integral and unitary. That is to say, China is either a developing country. They assume that China is either a developing country or a developed country. But China cannot be both. Okay? They assume that China is either a weak country or a strong country. But it assumes that China cannot be both at the same time. The other thing in common is that in conjunction with the first assumption, they all assume that China's interests are each integral and unitary. In other words, China has either the interests of the developing country or those of a developed country. It cannot have both at the same time. Okay? And China has either the interests of a weak country or those of a strong country. It cannot have both at the same time. Okay? But this is not true in reality. So the problem, it appears, may lie precisely in such kind of assumptions. The psychological studies have long found that people experience identity conflicts or crises at different stages of their life. And identity conflicts are particularly acute for adolescents who are between childhood and adulthood. As an adult, you have your identity and you have your interests. You have a certain pattern of behavior. As an adult, you have your identity and you have your interests. You have another pattern of behavior. But adolescents, they have the identity and interests of a child, and they have the identity of interest of an adult. And they have both at the same time. And they can't reconcile. That's why adolescent's behavior is very difficult to predict. That's why our parents, most of us have been parents before, have a difficult time to manage the adolescent, because adolescence has an identity conflict within them, and that makes their behavior quite different. According to Professor James Marcia, what is important about identity in adolescence, particularly late adolescence, is that this is the first time that physical development, cognitive skills, and social expectations coincide to enable young persons to sort through and synthesize their childhood identifications in order to construct a viable pathway toward their adulthood. And for adolescents, they have for a person, in adolescent period, they have the problem. For an institution, a social institution, when they are in transition, they also have the problem. In analyzing social systems, Habermas writes that there are two types of identity crisis for an institution. One is the legitimation crisis, and the other is motivation crisis. By legitimation crisis, it means the inability of a social entity to meet the demands and expectations it has assumed. By motivation crisis, he refers to the lack of meaning for action for social identity. So, whereas the legitimation crisis is caused by the problem of multiply defined self, whose definitions have become incompatible, the motivation crisis is caused by ill-defined self. So when you have multiply defined self, or when you have an ill-defined self, you have a crisis as an institution. In both cases, one finds difficult to make consistent choices. So the institution has difficulty making consistent choices because of either severe difficulty in reconciling the demands that follow from diverse commitments or a lack of commitment to goals and values. So from a sociological perspective, when an institution undergoing fundamental transformations, it also has identity conflicts. As a result, its behavior can be quite inconsistent and contradictory. So the multiply defined self and ill-defined self, in turn, are results of the coexistence of dual identity. In adolescent's case, he or she is between child and adult, and between child and as a child, he or she shares the values and commitments the parents pass on to them. As an adult, he or she has to sort through what they have learned outside the family in addition to what their parents have passed on to them, to develop a new adult identity on that basis. Similarly, as social institutions undergo transformation, they also experience identity conflict. So if identity conflict is the reason why adolescents or social entities act inconsistently, this may be the reason why China has become more inconsistent and unpredictable in its foreign policy behavior in recent years. So China is in the process of transition as it rises. Since China's adoption of reforms and openness policy in 1979, China has undergone drastic and fundamental transformations. As a result of these transformations, China is no longer the same revolutionary, poor, backward, and weak country of the past. At the same time, it is not quite a status quo, rich, advanced, and strong country yet. It is somewhere in between, and this is China. This can be seen in terms of both its identities and interests. In terms of identities, among other things, China is both a developing country and a developed one, depending on where you go. If you go to Pudong, China is very much developed. Pudong in Shanghai. If you go to the countryside, especially in the hilly area, it can be very poor, a developing country. China is also both a poor country and a very rich one. This morning I read news saying that China has 100 million rich people. That's a lot of people. China ranks the second in terms of the number of rich people. Okay, next only to the US, more than Japan, that's fascinating, I can't believe it, but so I'm not doing pretty well. I'm not doing well in China. Some people are becoming rich, I'm not. But anyway, but the per capita income of China is very low. A lot of people are very poor. Okay? So China is both a poor country and a rich country at the same time. And China is both a weak country and a strong country at the same time. The people outside China think that China is very strong. But if you talk to the Chinese, they don't think China is that strong. Actually, you can feel that it's not that strong. I remember one day I walked to Tiananmen Square, from Xidan. I was going to the Great Hall of the People to attend a memorial meeting, and I took the subway. So when I got to Xidan, it was still early, so I thought I would get out of the subway and walk there along the China Avenue. As I walked, I felt so uncomfortable. Why? I felt a lot of eyes on myself. I'm not sure whether I was walking in the right way, whether my lips were moving as people expect, or my facial expression was correct. Because these people, they jumped on me and put me under arrest because of the assumption that I might be a troublemaker. Lots of police around. So at that point, I can feel that China is not a strong country. So China is both strong and weak at the same time. China is both an ordinary country and a superpower at the same time. As an ordinary country, you pursue your interests just as everybody else. Try to take advantage of the system and not take a free ride if possible. But as a superpower, you have to maintain international order in order to protect your own interests. You cannot take a free ride. Identity defines interests. Because China has dual identities, China has dual set of interests. As a developing country, China sees the right to develop is more important than cutting emissions, reversing the climate change. But China is also a developed country, in a way. So increasingly, people in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, they are planning for the government, saying that you have to do something about PM 2.5 pollution. So you have to cut emission. So the Chinese government is taking drastic measures in doing it. It acts like a developed country's government. So China is both a poor country and a rich country at the same time. But as a poor country, China called for increase in international aid, on international assistance. So it has called on the rich countries to help the poor countries more. But when it comes to China, China also argued that China, should give aid according to its own circumstances. In other words, should not give as much. So China is a weak country. Weak country sees its own interest, sees non-intervention as its own interest, non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. That's the principle that China has adhered for a long time. But increasingly, China is also a strong country in a way. So on intervention issue, China's position has been experiencing quite interesting changes. China endorsed the no-fly zone resolution on the part of the UN against Libya, for example. And on other issues, China's position on this is changing in a subtle and important way. So because China has two sets of identities, China has two sets of interests on many issues. The coexistence of these two identities and interests on many issues has created much confusion for the Chinese to define their interests. What is China's interest? Chinese don't know, or Chinese cannot agree among themselves. Some see this as China's interest, some see that as China's interest, but these two things are in contradiction. Nevertheless, that's a problem for China. It happens at a time when the rest of the world really wants to know what China is up to, what China wants to do in the world as China becomes stronger in international relations. As China rises, everybody wants to know what China is going to do with its power. But it is precisely at this moment that the Chinese themselves cannot figure out what they really want to do, because they cannot agree on what China's interests are. So, if defining national interest is a serious challenge to all countries, to China is kind of an impossible task at this moment. Now, the implications for China's foreign policy behavior, I think at least the following. First, we find as a result of the dual identities and conflicting interests, China's foreign policy behavior assumes greater inconsistency and unpredictability. Yeah, we have discussed this already. And this is going to last for some time, as long as China is still in the process of transition. As a weak country, China will find it necessary to insist on sovereignty and oppose international intervention. In the meantime, as a strong country, it sees it appealing to identify with the UN principle of the responsibility to protect. Very interesting. These two things are very. As an ordinary country, China is tempted to recover as much as disputed territories, like islands and maritime waters, as possible. In the meantime, as a new superpower, it may find it attractive to focus on securing access rather than territory, as the US has been doing with its open door policy. I asked one of my students to write a paper, to do some research on how the US handled its own disputed territories and maritime interests. Very interesting. The US has not used force to deal with this problem. Why? I think Americans don't believe it's worth it. Nor do they believe it's morally correct. But anyway, China has a lot to learn how to handle this. But the US, of course, as the superpower, has some experience in this regard. In the second place, we find that the set of identities and interests that are associated with China's past are still defining China's foreign policy to a significant degree. As one sees that China still officially calls itself a developing country and has been making efforts to advance the interests of the developing countries, like Wen Jiabao's approach in the Copenhagen summit. China still sees itself as a weak country and continues to uphold the sovereignty principle and oppose to international intervention, at least in principle. China still defines itself as an ordinary power, thus finds it difficult to make compromise on territorial and maritime issues. In the third place, we find that whereas China's old identities and interests are shaping China's foreign policy behavior, China's new identities and interests have increasing influence on Chinese foreign policy behavior as China's transformation continues. So we find, China's advocacy of a free and open international trading system, China's defense of the authority of the UN, China's participation in the UN peacekeeping missions. More recently, President Xi, commits that China would set up a permanent military force to act for the UN peacekeeping purpose. China's opposition to proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, China's behavior in Sudan and Libya on international intervention. China has been helping to put pressure on leaders of those countries to make changes, sort of international interference. China's endorsement of the principle of the responsibility to protect. China's new identities have an interest, have in a way made China to adopt or to enhance their positions on these issues. In the fourth place, we find that the conflict of identity generated by value and moral confusion affects China's assessment of international problems. It's not only a conflict in terms of interests, it's also confusion in terms of values. So on the one hand, China has subscribed to such values as rule of law, human rights, and democracy. On the other hand, China does not see it appropriate to advocate them in the world, and also to propagate them in the world, as the US does, and does not find what North Korea has done to its own people particularly repulsive. So this is a contradiction in terms of value. In the fifth place, we find that the general trend of change in China's identities and interests are likely to shape China's foreign policy behavior in a direction dictated by the new set of identities and interests rather than the old set of identities and interests. So this means that over time, China is likely to see itself more as a developed country, a rich country, a strong country, and a superpower, and finds its interests more aligned with these identities. That means China's foreign policy behavior is likely to reflect more, like the countries which are rich, developed, strong, and superpower. So China's foreign policy behavior is likely to move in that direction rather than other directions if China's rise continues. Finally, we find that the inconsistency and unpredictability in China's foreign policy behavior induced by China's identity conflict may further complicate China's foreign relations, at least in the short run, precisely because China cannot send consistent and predictable signals to other countries. The outside world will be confused and frustrated about the way China behaves. I mean, this is the case today. It's going to be the case tomorrow, probably. It may take more measures, the outside world may take more measures to hedge against a potential China threat. So this, in turn, may influence China's foreign policy choices and make negative interactions and even conflict between China and the outside world more likely. Unfortunately, at least in the foreseeable future, unless China and the outside world, take precautionary measures to stop this negative trend of interactions. Now, implications for China and Japan relations. I think, the relationship between China and Japan is bad enough. Probably cannot be worse. So China is likely to send conflicting messages to Japan. For example, China probably on one hand has advocated, building a community of common destiny with neighbors, including Japan. But at the same time, China also may send a message that China is going to confront with Japan with the belief that the latter does not wish to face history and want to rearm to confront China. So that's how So China, on the one hand, will tell Japan we want to be friends, want to be good neighbors. At the same time, China may send messages to Japan saying that, we don't trust you. We have a history problem, we have a territorial problem, we cannot get along. Finally, and also as a weak country, China finds Japan's attitude towards history humiliating. For the Japanese, this is unthinkable. How can Japan's attitude towards history become a humiliating thing for China? But to a lot of people in China, they think Japan refuses to apologize. It's a reflection of the weakness of China, rather than the weakness of Japan. Japanese feel. So also they find this offensive. So and also some Chinese find Japan's efforts to become a normal country threatening China. Of course, they cannot specify what kind of threat that poses. But then you can imagine, if Japan becomes a normal country, they will spend more money on weapons, and then they may get involved in international conflicts and may send ships to the South China Sea. You can imagine all kinds of things. But anyway, as a weak country, China may think like this. And as a strong country, China believes that it has capabilities to pressure Japan to come back to the correct way of thinking about history and dealing with territorial issues. So you see the contradiction there? So in the short run, China and Japan relations are likely to be troublesome. History, territorial disputes, mutual suspicions are going to affect the relationship significantly. In the long run, however, one has good reason to be optimistic about the relationship. After all, the two countries have huge stakes in their economic relationship. We are highly interdependent. We benefit from this economic relationship. Now Japan has opened doors to Chinese tourists, and you are getting a lot of tourist dollars. This is a mutually beneficial relationship in terms of economic. And Japan is unlikely to change its pacifist history despite Prime Minister Abe's efforts to make Japan a normal country. Even when Japan becomes a normal country, I don't think Japan will become a militaristic country. I think the chance is very small, even though nothing is absolute in the world. And this probably would help China to realize that Japan, after all, is not big threat, as one can imagine. And also China will become more developed, richer, and stronger, and therefore China probably will share more things in common with Japan, more like Japan, and have more vested interest in peace, stability, and prosperity in the world, and as well as in the region. All this is conducive to a better relationship between China and Japan. I hope that the two countries will try to promote their relationship on this kind of basis, rather than focusing on the conflictual areas. Of course, to manage the conflicts, I think they should sit down and think very carefully about where their real interests are, and develop a constructive relationship on that basis. In conclusion, I think as a country caught in the middle of the fundamental transitions, China has acquired a new set of identities and interests on many fronts. Because of the transitions are not complete, the old identities and interests remain. Such a situation ensures that China's foreign policy behavior can only be inconsistent and unpredictable in many areas. Looking to the future, in the short run, the problem of inconsistency and unpredictability may even intensify. This complicates China's foreign relations. However, in the long run, given the direction of change in China's transitions, China is likely to define itself and its interests in terms of the new set of identities and interests, and its foreign policy behavior may become more consistent and predictable. This is not only good news for China, but also good news for the outside world, including Japan. This is my talk. Thank you very much.